Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome. Today I wanted to give you another roundup of the stuff that I've finished. I had a bunch of time to listen to my audiobooks this week. Work was a bit slower and a bit of driving and stuff, so I was able to finish more than I realized, which is good because I just found out that there's a few other ones on my TBR that are now going to be expiring towards the end of next month, so I had to add them. Children of Ash and Elm, which is about the Vikings. Airman Mortensen, it's by the same author who wrote Dances with Wolves, and the one that I'm currently just started, The Holy Road, which is the sequel to that. And Lost Islamic History, which I had been wanting to read for a long time, so I will put that to the front of my TBR really quickly. SPQR, which is History of the Roman Empire. And then, if I have time, a book about the Reformation. That has always interested me. So I'm hoping to get even more added, but it kind of takes away from my reading physical books just because I'm donating any of my extra time to that instead of the books. I have briefly started a few of the more physical. I have an ebook, The Big Sleep, which I borrowed from the library, so I have to finish that within the next week, and I can hopefully do that for a video separately for Private Eye July. It's already interesting. I enjoy it. And I'm hoping, I don't know if I'll finish this one before the end of the month for Jane Austen July, but it's Sanditon. I've never read this one. It's the one of the novels of hers that I have not read yet. So I'm trying to work my way through it, but I'm only getting maybe 2 chapters a night, and the writing is very small, so it's quite a bit harder. I don't actually like it when it's written this small. And then another one, I opened it on my first video and finally just started to read it at lunch, so I only get a few pages in, especially since I'm highlighting quite a bit and trying to process it and stuff. So it's Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, and I am enjoying it. I've already learned a lot. I will briefly mention this after I do my wrap up of the other ones I finished, just because there was an interesting piece in here that I wanted to include with my other reviews, so I will get on to that. So the one that I just finished was actually another one by Italo, Calvino, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. I really enjoyed his book, If on a Winter's Night Traveler. It was very experimental, very unique, and entertaining. So this one that I just finished, very short, was the Cloven Viscount, and I don't want you, like, if you, I do absolutely recommend you read it, but I don't want to give much of a review for it, because I wish that I had gone into it completely blind to it, because it's fun and hard to explain, so just don't read anything about it. Just go ahead and give it a listen or a read. Listening wise, it was, just around a little over 2 hours, so it won't take long to read, but it is, the way that he writes, it's very fantastical and experimental and just like whimsical. It almost reads like a parable, except for there's always a very strong moral message in it. It tries to teach you a bit try to like be philosophical and get you to understand things. And so for this one was about virtue, and how blind virtue, blind goodness, kind of like the old quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So just to blindly think that you're doing good and not turn around and look at the consequences of how what you did over here actually has an adverse effect over here, was a very interesting take, especially in such a short story and how you need to be whole and complete, as in not like none of us is just good or just evil. Like we're all have this duality to us that's complicated and complex, but that makes us whole and that makes us human, and that actually makes us better if we temper our bad traits with our good, and our good with our bad. It's hard to explain without trying to give away too much, but I just found that duality and that philosophy and that sense of morality very interesting. It's got a bit of a, like I said, a parable telling, almost like it sort of reminded me a little bit of like whimsically, like The Princess Bride, or like absurdly as kind of like Don Quixote, and just the duality reminded me a bit of whether you're Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or even the Man in the Iron Mask, like just these two parts of you. And I don't want to give any more than that, just I highly recommend it, and like I said, he is quickly becoming one of my favorite writers. Another one that I finished yesterday was The House on the Lagoon, and that is by Rosario, I didn't write it down, Rosario Ferré, and he's a Puerto Rican writer, and it was written in 95, but there were parts of it that I found absolutely fascinating. The history, it gives the history of Puerto Rico through the history of this family. So it's like a family, a sprawling epic, like the ones that I love, and you just focus on these characters and their differing views and their differing experiences, and it's told through two different lenses. So it's what's happening now, and then it's through one of the characters writing a manuscript and retelling the story as she wants it. And so it kind of shows how history is written by the victors. It's through a narrative biased lens of the person writing it, what they experience, what experiences and biases they're bringing in to the project, even if they're researching it. And so you kind of get this little push and pull back as the narrative lines up to the present now and stuff like that. So I found that part interesting. It was a bit longer, or it felt longer. There was parts in that kind of slowed and drug out a bit. I didn't feel like all of it was necessary. So I only gave it a 3.75 stars, which for me is still it's still a very good book that I would recommend. I just had minor grievances myself, just with the pacing and the length of it and stuff. But the stuff that I found absolutely fascinating. So since it gives the history of Puerto Rico, it talks about this. It starts from like the time of Spanish independence and then the U.S. occupation, like around 6 months later. And so you have all the Spanish influences. So you have a very big religious intolerance, because from the Catholic Spanish influence towards anything that's not Catholic, especially when there's a small part in when Mennonite comes and wants to try to marry the people, because he doesn't see them, they have common law marriages and he doesn't see them as being recognized, so he's going to try to do it. And there's this big to-do where they run him out of town for not being Catholic, which I didn't realize there was that kind of intolerance. There's also racial intolerance, because you had they're being affected by the Spanish Civil War in the early in the 1930s. You have them being affected by all the stuff going on in the United States, because we're occupying them, and they have U.S. citizenship, but they don't have statehood, and so there is a huge debate in there versus independence versus statehood, and which one they prefer, and there's families are divided on that topic, which I found interesting just to hear the all-around different debates on the area, especially since with the government that we have right now, probably wanted to strip their citizenship completely and not even recognize them as one of our territories. So that kind of felt very relevant, that part. But so you have their being influenced by everyone around them, but also by the ones who colonized them. And so you have them have cultural, like confusion, or their different influences. So you have the racism, and then you had a lot of, at least I didn't realize too at the time, they had a lot of their population were slaves, and so there's this racism there with them in them too, especially when the Europeans came down, because they wanted pure bloodlines. They did not want any black blood, slave blood. They didn't want any Moor blood or Muslim blood. They wanted it all pure blood. And so there was that division in the country too. And with the country being so small, it's crazy how many different divisions and factions that I had never even thought about before. And also it had a big part about the Nazi connection. And I don't know how many of you know, but like during World War II, after we defeated Germany, or like as we were fighting Germany, a lot of the Nazis came down and settled down in South America, Argentina, Brazil. That Cantoris book that I mentioned in my mid-year wrap-up talked about how they settled also near Paraguay and in those Uruguay and those areas. And I did not realize that it would also affect Puerto Rico. Their merchant ships were being sunk by the Nazi submarines. I didn't realize that they even came down this far. And you had some Nazi sympathizers there with all the racism and stuff in the country at that time. You had several people who were thought to be or accused of being Nazi spies because they were against the United States, and different stuff like that was fascinating to learn. And one of the other things that I was interested in is the Irish resistance influence. And this is the part that absolutely fascinates me, because in the book that I mentioned earlier, the Capitalism and Slavery, it was talking about how some of the first slaves amongst, like we always think of the black slaves coming from Africa, after the Europeans and stuff enslaved the Native Americans, they didn't work out, and then they tried to like get them just off their land completely, and that's when they either massacred them or they put them on reservations and moved them out west. So they needed someone to fill that gap, which is where a lot of the all the enslaved people from Africa come. But there was also indentured servants that came from the British colonies. British people didn't want to deal with their poor, their homeless. They didn't want to deal with their convicts. They didn't want to deal with people who were against them religiously. So at the time, they're Protestant. So they were sending a lot of their, Catholic people. So most of them were, Scottish and Irish. They would send them to their colonies. So America got a lot of indentured servants, and so did and convicts, and so did Australia. and so that was a bunch of their workforce that I didn't fully realize. Like I knew some of the extent, but this went into great detail, and how a large majority of those people who were sent because they refused to convert to Protestantism were Irish, and so they got sent here as like indentured servants or forced servants, slaves. And that's interesting just because it came up in my other book that I had just read, which was Cattle Kingdom, and how they all went out west, and then they didn't want the rancher barons taking over their land once they finally got some out there, and how it just fascinates me how the Irish keep showing up in places that I didn't expect, just because of their continued oppression and discrimination from the English. And so it was fascinating that they ended up here in Puerto Rico and helped with their resistance, whether it was they actually tried to have a slave revolt that failed, but they also tried to resist in the statehood and tried to get their own independence, which once again failed. But they were inspired and helped out by some of the Irish people there who showed them how to resist. And so I just gotta say, I am impressed and proud for the Irish for being able to persevere, to continue to resist oppression, and just to fight. And I especially love how it kind of comes full circle with them knowing what it's like to be oppressed and discriminated against, and how they are in complete solidarity with Palestine now. So I like the full circle of like you reading them throughout history and then it coming to fruition in present day. But another just random fact in a book that I read previously, where they just randomly came up too, was the Burglary, which is about the exposing of J. Edgar Hoover's secret FBI. So a bunch of civilians who started out as anti-Vietnam War protesters started to then think that what Hoover was doing in America was he was hiding something and he was corrupt about it. They knew that it was he was very prejudiced against the black population, and arrested a lot, and was very opposed to the anti-war protesters. He called them un-American, which very much reminds me once again of the United States today in their being round up and sent to concentration camps, especially with that what they call alligator Alcatraz down in Florida, where they're sending a lot of the immigrants that are, especially those who are protesting the war in Palestine. Actually, not even a war in Palestine, but Israel's genocide of Palestinians. So if they're protesting, then they're rounded up and then being either shipped elsewhere unknown to anyone, or now they've built that concentration camp down in Florida. So there's a lot of parallels to that book, to the book The Burglary, as well as now, just because they wanted to release Hoover's corruption, and so they had to burglarize one of the FBI offices to try to release his papers, to show how badly that corruption was not just hidden, but how much it affected so many citizens in the United States. And the strange Irish connection there is the fact that the Irish were blamed for it, because there was two brothers, Irish priests, the Berengers, the Berrigans, and they were huge anti-Vietnam War protesters, and they were under surveillance and hated by Hoover, so that when the burglary happened, they were his first suspects. He thought it was them. But the people who were also protesting the Vietnam War, they would like attack recruitment buildings so that they wouldn't recruit more soldiers. And a lot of their tactics and stuff that they learned for resistance fighting, they learned from these Irish priests, the Catholic priests. So I think that was a fascinating aspect as well, and how small the world really is, but also how churches used to be about resistance. You know, you had Martin Luther King Jr. and the whole group of freedom fighters who were during the civil rights movement in the 60s and a little earlier, were trying to get organized, and they would a lot of times meet in churches. And then you read about the Berrigans and how it was priests who did resistance. So we went from a world and a country that the church was the moral ground in the country. It was the ones who saw evil and fought to stop it. And now we have this rise of Christian nationalism, who are perverting and subverting those ideals and those morals to do what is being done now, and try to say, once again, they have this religious justification for it that they used when they came to the United States to begin with, when they had the manifest destiny and this God was ours by land, is our land, God ordained, and just seeing how you can take the same idea of why you're here, and it's, I'm here to conquer because God told me to, which obviously we're also seeing now in Israel, but also the counter to that, and the one saying, God said love, God said, help the poor, help the needy, help the widows, help, help, not destroy, not conquer. And so that's why reading is fascinating, especially when I read nonfiction and when I read history, is because you see all these little pieces that you don't think are interconnected, but how history, once again, unchecked, history repeats itself, and that's why we have to learn. And these were great books as a remembrance of that. And I just didn't mean to get political again, but when you read a book and it's about trying to get independence and it's about oppression, it's really hard not to see the implications in the real world, especially with how things are going today. So once again, here I am. And for my hat, a shout out to my friend in the UAE, Saracen Salute, and he made a video for me, or not for me, but mentioned me because he did a bunch of daggers and stuff from the Middle East, and I thought that was very interesting, and I loved that he did that. And so I told him that I would do a video for him. So I'm going to do one later once I round up my research and a few book ideas to do Michigan, because he wanted to learn about Michigan. So this is my first little nod to that. So it's Latin, rise from the ashes. And so it's actually the motto in Detroit, from the ashes we will rise. And so this was designed by Hutchinson, who is a Detroit Lion, and he has his own line of clothing and stuff, but he took the Detroit motto and he made a hat out of it, and he uses it as his own model. So I thought I would share that little tidbit. But anyway, I hope you give at least some of these a chance, or even if you're not going to read the books, do some research on those topics of interest, because I found them fascinating. Have a great day.